My name is Ryan Ellis. 2 years ago, I turned down a $45,000 contract to save my parents' dying store. I rebuilt their brand from scratch, brought in local customers, gave up sleep time and everything else. Then they handed it all to my brother, the golden lawyer, and thanked me with sentence. Last week, they told me not to come to his wedding. So I didn't. But I sent something instead, a USB-labeled Family Memories. It played in front of 200 guests. By the time the music stopped, the bride was gone, my mother had fainted, and the video had already gone viral. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about a son they tried to erase and what happened when he decided not to be invisible anymore. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and into your bones had started to settle over Portland. I had just finished cleaning up the dishes from a sad little dinner for one when my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, like somehow. If I waited long enough, it would stop and I wouldn't have to answer. But I did. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound like someone she hadn't ignored for the last 6 months. "Hi, Ryan." Her voice was as clipped and formal as always. I could hear wind in the background. Maybe she was walking, maybe pacing. "Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that Derek's wedding is happening next month, November 21st. I blinked. Right. I hadn't even known he was engaged. There was a pause long enough to make it awkward, so I filled it. "That's great. I'm happy for him." Another pause. Then she said it quick and clean, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "We think it's better if you don't come." I stood still in the middle of my tiny kitchen, my hand gripping the edge of the counter. The words didn't register at first. "What?" "It's not personal," she continued. "It's Derek's big day. We don't want any distractions. You know how emotional things can get with you around, and Rachel wants a drama-free ceremony." Rachel. So that was her name. I hadn't even met her. Of course I hadn't. I said, though I didn't. "Not really." There was a silence. She didn't fill it. "Okay," I said again, quieter. "Thanks for letting me know." "All right then. Take care of yourself, Ryan." She hung up before I could say goodbye. I stood there in the kitchen for a while, the sound of the fridge humming louder than usual. My apartment wasn't big, but suddenly it felt massive, like the walls had stretched outward and I was the only living thing left in it. I wasn't shocked. Not really. This wasn't the first time I had been excluded from something important. Birthdays, reunions, even Dad's retirement party. Somehow I was always the one who'd stir up too much, be too much, say too much. They never said it directly, but the message was always the same: be smaller, be quieter, don't outshine Derek. I sat down on the edge of the couch, staring at the blank TV. The silence in the room was suffocating, and yet I didn't move. My mind wasn't even racing. It was empty, numb. Eventually, I grabbed my hoodie, slipped on my sneakers, and went out for a walk. I didn't have a destination, just needed to move. The cold air hit my face like a slap. It felt good in a way, honest. As I walked past familiar coffee shops and closed bookstores, my mind slowly started filling again. I remembered when I helped Derek pass his finals in college, writing half his papers while juggling my own job. I remembered when I drove 6 hours to help Mom when Dad had surgery, only to find out Derek had arrived the day before and somehow gotten all the credit. I remembered working night shifts at my last agency while still managing to fly back to Salem every other weekend to help at the family store when it was going under. I built a marketing plan from scratch, doubled their foot traffic, and saved that damn business. And yet when it stabilized, they handed the reins to Derek. Because he had a law degree. Because he was more professional. I walked for what felt like hours before circling back to my place. My phone had one text from Jake. "You alive?" I replied. "Barely." 10 seconds later, he called. I let it ring once, then picked up. "Let me guess," he said. "Wedding." "Yup." "And they told you not to come?" "Yup." Silence on the line. Then Jake exhaled sharply. "I'm gonna murder them." "Don't bother," I said. "They've already killed whatever was left. Come to Seattle, stay here for a while, get out of that apartment." "I can't," I said. "Work's picking up. I just landed the Jefferson account. It's a mess, but something to focus on." Jake didn't push, but I could feel the frustration bleeding through the phone. "You don't owe them silence, Rye. One day you'll have to stop pretending this doesn't hurt." I know I said, and I meant it, but knowing something and doing something about it are never the same. After the call, I sat back down, this time on the floor, back against the couch, staring up at the ceiling. My throat was dry, but I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there thinking about what it meant to be told not to come to your own brother's wedding. What it meant to be the shadow in someone else's spotlight. Again. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid there until the sky turned from black to gray. And when the sun finally crept through the blinds, I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. There was work to do. There was always work to do. I buried myself in client briefs and timelines, letting the chaos of deliverables fill up the silence that had settled around me. I told myself I didn't care, that it didn't matter, that I was used to this. But there's a difference between being used to something and being numb to it, and I wasn't numb. I wasn't, not yet. On Wednesday afternoon, I was cleaning out some old folders from my external drive, looking for a pitch deck I'd made years ago, when I stumbled on a batch of scanned family photos. I had forgotten they were there. Christmases, birthdays, vacations. There I was, always at the edge of the frame, sometimes half cut from the picture entirely. The one taking the photo, the one looking away. There was one from Derek's high school graduation. He was front and center in his cap and gown. Mom beaming beside him, Dad's hand on his shoulder. I was in the back behind a potted plant, barely visible. I remember that day. I had just been accepted into the University of Washington on a full ride. No one mentioned it. My relationship with Derek had always been performative. In public, we were the picture of sibling harmony. At home, I was his fallback. If he needed a ride, I drove. If he needed help with homework, I stayed up with him. But when I got my first internship at a boutique agency in Seattle, he didn't even congratulate me. He told Mom I was wasting my time on artsy nonsense. Dad used to say Derek had the right mind for business, that he thought long-term, that he was born to lead. I was the creative one, emotional, the one who needed grounding. I didn't challenge it then. I thought maybe that was love, just a different shape of it. I remember a summer when I was 14. Derek and I were at our grandparents' house in Eugene. Grandma had asked us to paint the fence. Halfway through, Derek got bored and left. I stayed, finished it, got sunburned. That evening over dinner, Grandma praised how nice the fence looked, and Dad said Derek always gets things done right. I opened my mouth to correct him, then shut it. That became a habit. Years later, I got my first job offer from a mid-size agency in San Francisco. It was a big deal. I called home to share the news. Mom answered. "That's wonderful," she said. "But have you heard Derek made junior partner last week? Your dad is over the moon." I remember nodding like she could see me, the excitement draining out of my voice. I told her I was happy for him. Everything I accomplished was measured against the invisible bar Derek had already cleared. When I launched my freelance business and signed my first 5-figure client, Dad asked if I'd considered getting an MBA. Derek had one. When I bought my first used car with my savings, Mom reminded me that Derek had leased a BMW. They never said I failed. They just made sure I knew he had succeeded more. Even at family events, I felt like a guest. One Thanksgiving, a relative asked me if I was the cousin from Colorado. I wasn't even offended. I just smiled and passed the gravy. There was one photo that hit me harder than the rest, a family trip to Mount Rainier. I was maybe 10, standing next to the edge of a cliff, arms crossed, looking right at the camera. Derek was next to Dad, pointing at something in the distance. Mom was fixing her hair. I remember that day vividly. I had asked if I could take the lead on the hike. Dad laughed. "Let Derek guide us. You always get distracted." That's what they thought of me. Distracted, emotional, unreliable. Never mind the hours I spent building out their store's new social media presence or the Christmas I missed with friends to help with inventory. That wasn't leadership. That was background noise. I closed the photo folder, shut the laptop, sat there for a long while, fingers steepled against my lips. Not angry, not sad, just tired. Jake texted around 9. "You up?" "Yeah." "Beer." I hesitated, then replied, "Come over." He arrived 20 minutes later wearing his usual hoodie and jeans, holding 2 bottles. No small talk, just sat beside me and handed me one. "They ever tell you why?" he asked eventually. "Said I'd be a distraction." He snorted. "You're a distraction now, apparently." We sat in silence for a while. Jake glanced at the coffee table where my laptop still sat open. "Looking at old photos, yeah. Anything good depends how you define good." Jake leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "You know what I think," he said. "I think you stopped trying to get their approval a long time ago. But part of you still wanted to be included, not praised, just seen." I didn't respond, because he was right. He looked at me again. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said. "I really don't." He nodded slowly. "You want to disappear for a few days, go somewhere?" "Hit the coast," I smiled for the first time that night. "Maybe. But first I need to get through this week. I've got 2 campaigns going live and a pitch due Friday." He stood up. "All right, but when you're done being a responsible adult, let's be irresponsible for a bit. Deal?" He left not long after, and I cleaned up the bottles, folded the blanket on the couch, went through the motions. Normalcy. In bed, I stared at the ceiling again, my mind drifting between timelines, 1,000 little moments of being passed over. Forgotten. Minimized. Not out of cruelty, just routine, just because that's how it always was, and I realized something. Maybe they didn't hate me. Maybe they just never really saw me. And maybe that was worse. The last time I felt seen by my parents was the week I gave up $45,000 to save their store. It was 2 years ago. I had just landed a major contract with a new organic snack brand launching across the Pacific Northwest. A 6-month campaign, fully integrated, 45,000 on the table. All I had to do was sign and send. That same week, I got a call from Dad. His voice was different, tight, like someone trying to act calm while the world collapsed around him. He said they were in trouble. The family store in Salem was bleeding cash. Sales had dropped nearly 40% since the new supermarket opened 5 blocks away. They had tried loyalty discounts coupons, even brought in a part-time consultant who told them to rearrange the aisles. Nothing worked. I didn't even hesitate. I told the snack brand I had a conflict and backed out. They weren't thrilled, but I didn't care. I packed up, took a leave from the agency, and drove down to Salem that weekend. The store was worse than I imagined. Dust on the shelves, flickering lights in the back, freezer posters for expired promotions still taped to the windows. The logo was still the same clip art basket my mom had designed on her home computer in 1998. I got to work immediately, rebranded the place, updated the signage, made them a new logo, gave the store a warmer color scheme, built a simple website with pickup ordering. I changed the layout to increase foot traffic flow and placed the seasonal items near the front window to catch passerby attention. But the real shift came from the marketing campaign. I ran ads targeting Salem locals, built a referral program, started a Saturday sampling booth with local vendors. I organized a back-to-school community event in the parking lot with free snacks and face painting. Moms came. Kids dragged their parents in. We saw a 22% increase in foot traffic within the first 3 weeks. I trained the staff to upsell without sounding pushy. Installed a basic CRM system to track returning customers. Even taught my dad how to post on Facebook without cropping his own face out. Every week I sent updates to the family. Numbers, metrics, graphs. I printed them out and taped them on the wall behind the counter like battle trophies. And it worked. 6 months later, the store was not only stable, it was growing. We were up 17% year over year. The local paper did a piece on our revival. Dad framed it and put it behind the register. There were moments during that time I thought maybe this was the beginning of something better. Dad started asking for my opinion on inventory. Mom brought me coffee in the mornings. Derek didn't call once, but I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. Then one night in October, I came home from the store, hands still sticky from moving crates of Halloween candy, and found both of them sitting at the kitchen table. Dad cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he said. "Now that the store is back on track, we think it's time to bring in more structure. Legal structure. Derek's offered to help oversee things, just a few adjustments to the ownership, a little cleanup." I looked at them, then at the table, then back at them. "You're giving it to Derek?" Dad nodded slowly. "He has the legal background. We want to make sure the store has a long-term strategy. He can handle the paperwork, the taxes. You know how messy that stuff gets." I was silent. Mom reached for my hand. "You did an amazing job, Ryan. Truly. We couldn't have done this without you. But you're busy. You have your marketing, your city life. This way you don't have to worry about it." That night they took me out to dinner at a mid-range steakhouse to say thank you. Dad raised a glass to new beginnings. I barely touched my food. Afterward, I walked past the store one more time before heading back to Portland. The lights were still on. I could see the new layout glowing through the glass, the branded signage perfectly centered in the window. My signage. When I got home, I opened my laptop and stared at the emails from the snack company. The door I had shut for them, the one that was now locked. Jake called the next morning. I told him everything. He didn't even try to hide his anger. "They used you. They drained you dry and handed the keys to someone who wasn't even there." "I know," I said. "Why aren't you mad?" "I am." "Then say it." I did eventually. But only to myself. The following weeks I stayed quiet, focused on rebuilding my portfolio, slowly reaching out to new clients. I didn't go back to the store. Not once. I told myself it was fine, that it was what they needed, that I was too busy anyway. But every time someone mentioned Salem or family business or brothers, something twisted in my gut. I tried to forget. I really did. But some debts don't disappear just because the books look balanced. Jake showed up at my apartment unannounced 3 days after the dinner. He didn't knock. He just used the spare key I had given him back in college and walked in carrying a 6-pack and a bag of takeout from our favorite Thai place. I was sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes of old campaign materials I was trying to sort through, pretending I was doing something productive. "You look like you just lost a custody battle," he said, setting the food down. I didn't even look up. I did worse. I gave up custody voluntarily. He sat across from me, cracking open a beer. I know you're trying to be zen about this, but this isn't just some miscommunication. They cut you out, man. Again. I nodded slowly. There was no point arguing. He knew. He'd always known. Jake was there from day one. We met at the University of Washington during freshman orientation. He was loud, sarcastic, a little obnoxious, and completely unapologetic. The opposite of me, which is probably why we clicked. We balanced each other out. Over the years, he'd seen every version of me. The burnout after my first agency job, the nights I called crying after family dinners, the triumphs I tried to share only to have them dismissed. He never judged. He never asked why I still cared. He just knew I did. That night we sat on the couch eating pad CU and drinking cheap beer, watching a rerun of a cooking competition neither of us cared about. At some point he muted the TV. You ever think about leaving what Portland, this, them? I stared at the screen, pretending I didn't hear him. He kept going anyway. Move to Seattle. Crash with me for a bit. Start fresh. You've got the skills, the experience. We could start something together. Build a real agency. No family strings attached. I smiled without humor. What makes you think I'm ready for that? He shrugged. You're not. But one day they're going to push just a little harder and you won't bend. You'll break. I didn't respond. He wasn't wrong. The idea of starting over somewhere else was tempting. But so was the tiny, pathetic hope that my parents might just once say thank you without a condition. That they might see me not as a backup plan, but as someone who mattered. I wasn't ready to let that go. Jake stayed the night, crashed on the couch like old times. In the morning, he made eggs while singing off-key and somehow managed to burn toast in a toaster oven. When he left, he didn't bring it up again. But the seed had been planted. In the weeks that followed, I kept busy. Picked up new clients, landed a small retainer with a vegan bakery in Eugene. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept my mind occupied. The store in Salem faded to the background. I stopped checking their Facebook page. Stopped answering Mom's sporadic texts asking if I was doing okay. Stopped trying to figure out why none of them ever brought up what had happened. It was like they believed ignoring it made it vanish. But some days in the quiet moments between meetings or late at night when the city noise dulled to a low hum, I'd hear Jake's voice. You'll break. And I knew he was right. It wasn't just about the store, or the wedding, or even Derek. It was about years of silence, of being polite, of shrinking myself to fit into their version of me. And I was tired. One Saturday, I found myself in Seattle for a client meeting. Jake insisted I stay the night. Isra's apartment was on Capitol Hill, messy as ever, filled with half-finished art pieces and plants he never remembered to water. We stayed up talking about life, work, regret. He asked again. What are you holding on to? I didn't answer. But I didn't say no. 2 weeks after the night at Jake's, I got a message from an old high school friend who still lived in Salem. It was casual at first, a quick hello and a comment about how she had seen me in some old promo videos for the store. Then she dropped the question. Is it true what they're saying? That you skimmed off the top? I stared at the screen, reread the sentence 3 times. My chest went cold. I asked her what she meant. Apparently, word around town was that I had used the store's marketing budget to fund my own side projects. That I had overcharged vendors, taken kickbacks, maybe even pocketed money from the back-to-school event we ran in the parking lot. She said she didn't believe it, but others were talking. Longtime customers had stopped coming. Someone had posted anonymously in a local community group warning others to avoid the store because of past shady dealings with their previous marketer. My name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was clear. I didn't respond to her right away. I just sat there, phone in hand, pulse thudding in my neck. Shame burned in my gut. Not because it was true, it wasn't, but because for a split second I thought maybe people would believe it. Maybe they wanted to. I had the receipts, literally. Every transaction from the campaigns I ran, every invoice I created, every vendor I paid. I had kept everything organized because I'd been trained to over-prepare. Because when you're always the one questioned, you learn to document everything. I opened my old folders, the ones from the Salem store days, pulled up emails, cross-checked numbers, looked through screenshots and expense logs. It was all clean, impeccable. I started saving the suspicious posts, screenshots of group threads, copies of emails from vendors who suddenly stopped replying, notes of conversations I remembered having with my parents and staff. I even backed up texts from Mom, one where she thanked me for keeping the books in order. Every digital breadcrumb, I collected it. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I stayed quiet, observed. I watched as their store's online reviews dipped. Not dramatically, just a steady trickle of neutral ratings. Comments like, felt off or something changed recently. I checked their social media and noticed the engagement had dropped. Their once weekly posts became sporadic, uncoordinated. It looked like Derek had taken over and didn't know what he was doing. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt sick. One evening, I drove out to a grocery store across town and ran into a couple who used to frequent my events in Salem. They didn't recognize me at first, but when the man realized who I was, his expression changed. "You're the guy from Ellis Market, right?" "Yeah, I was." He exchanged a look with his wife. "We heard some stuff about the fundraiser money. You know, the school drive?" I took a breath. "That money went straight to the school district. I have the paperwork to prove it." They nodded slowly, not unfriendly but wary, like they weren't sure if they should believe me, or if it even mattered. After they walked away, I stood there in the frozen foods aisle, staring at bags of peas I didn't want. My hands were shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed, laptop open, surrounded by files. I reread every message I had saved, every comment, every hint of a whisper meant to rot my name from the inside out. And then I heard my father's voice in my head. "Derek has the legal mind. We need structure," followed by my mother's. "You're too emotional sometimes. You take things too personally." And then I thought about Jake, about the way he watched me carry all of this like it was normal. I will not let this slide. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even revenge. It was clarity. They had taken what I gave, twisted it, and tried to erase the truth I built. They thought I would swallow it like I always did. But not this time. The first morning in Seattle, I woke up on Jake's pull-out couch with a stiff neck and the faint hum of construction outside his apartment window. The light was different here, cleaner, like possibility, like reinvention. We didn't waste time. Jake had been floating the idea of a brand consultancy for years. He had a background in graphic design and a sharp eye for consumer trends. I brought the marketing and operations. Together we could build something that helped small independent businesses compete against the big chains swallowing every street corner. We called it North Beam Creative. The name was Jake's. He said it reminded him of stability and light. We filed the paperwork within 2 weeks, set up a home office in his spare bedroom, and hit the ground running. The first clients were referrals, a bakery in Queen Anne that wanted a rebrand for its 20th anniversary, a vintage clothing shop in Belltown struggling with foot traffic. We helped them tell their stories better, clean visuals, targeted social campaigns. Website overhauls that didn't look like they were built in 2007. Word got around. Within 6 months, we were juggling contracts across Washington and Oregon. By the end of the first year, we'd signed with 12 retail chains in 3 states offering everything from logo design to in-store experience mapping. It was fast, brutal, exhilarating. But in the quiet moments, the doubt crept in. One night after a 12-hour day spent battling mock-up revisions and budget negotiations, I sat on the kitchen floor eating cold pizza straight from the box. Jake walked in, saw me hunched over, and grabbed 2 beers from the fridge. "You look like someone just told you Santa's not real," he said. I chuckled barely. "I don't know," I said. "It's all happening. And I keep thinking, maybe I traded my family for ambition." Jake sat down next to me, handing me a bottle. "You didn't trade anything. They made their choice. You're just finally making yours." I stared at the bottle in my hand. The label was peeling. "But what if I'm the one who's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Family is not who shares your blood, it's who shows up when you're bleeding. And I'm not saying I'm great with metaphors, but I haven't seen them mop up a single drop." I laughed genuinely this time. Still that voice lingered, the one that sounded like my mother's, saying I was sensitive, saying I overreacted, that maybe I misinterpreted everything, that maybe if I had just been more understanding, things would be different. But every time I opened the files of saved evidence, every time I saw a drop in Ellis Market's Yelp ratings, every time I remembered the look on that couple's face in the grocery aisle, it reaffirmed one thing. They didn't just misunderstand me. They erased me. Northbeam became my clarity. We worked with underdogs, family businesses on the edge of closing, community shops buried under Amazon's shadow. We helped them fight back, not with money, but with identity. There was a florist in Tacoma who cried when she saw her new logo. A bookstore in Spokane that doubled its foot traffic after we revamped their signage and hosted a local author series. These weren't just clients. They were proof that I could build something, that I wasn't some background extra in Derek's biopic, that I was more than the kid who stood outside the frame. We moved into a shared office space by year 2, hired our first assistant, started looking at expanding into California. The growth was aggressive, but I kept my head down, focused. Every now and then, Jake would catch me staring too long at a client's family photo on their desk, or pausing when a father and son walked into a discovery session together. He never said anything, just gave me space, but one day after we finished a strategy presentation for a family-owned grocery chain outside Olympia, he said something that stuck. "You keep building everyone else's redemption story. When are you going to write your own?" I didn't answer, but the next morning I opened the folder of screenshots and emails again. And I started a new one. The wedding invitation never came. Not officially, but I saw it. On Instagram, on Derek's fiance's Pinterest board, public for anyone to see. Ivory and gold, vineyard ceremony, Napa Valley, the kind of wedding that screamed curated perfection. They didn't bother to hide it, or maybe they thought I wouldn't look. But I did, and I remembered Jake's voice in my head. "Write your own redemption story." I stared at the screen for a long time. The date, the venue, the theme. I imagined the speeches, the polite laughter, the father-son toast where Thomas would mention legacy and family and conveniently forget mine. I clicked save on the folder I had started building the day after the rumors surfaced, labeled it for Napa. It took 3 weeks to put everything together. Every clip, every voice memo, every piece of footage I had from my time at the store. Security camera pulls of me reorganizing aisles late at night. Videos I had filmed on my phone while fixing the layout or training staff. Audio from that night in the kitchen when they told me Derek would be taking over. I had left my voice recorder running after an earlier call with a client. Pure accident. Or maybe something deeper knew I'd need it. I edited everything into a video montage. It opened with soft piano music, a slow fade-in of old family photos, holidays, birthdays, me and Derek on our first bikes, me blowing out candles with no one looking at me, then clips of the store, my hands lifting shelves, my voice explaining campaign strategy, overlaid with muted background audio of my parents praising Derek in public interviews, and then layered carefully the private recordings. My father's voice saying I was too emotional, my mother whispering that Derek was more polished, more presentable, the conversation about giving him the store. The music never changed, gentle, elegant, the kind of instrumental people use for engagement slideshows. The dissonance made it hit harder. I exported the file, named it Ellis Family Memories, burned it onto a gold-embossed USB drive, wrapped it in delicate navy blue paper and tucked it into a cream envelope with my parents' address handwritten in calligraphy. No return label. It arrived 2 days before the wedding. Jake watched me from the kitchen while I sealed the package. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I nodded. "I'm not going, but I'm not staying silent either." I didn't ask if they'd play it. I knew them. A USB labeled Family Memories from the Estranged Son. They would assume it was an olive branch, something nostalgic. They'd pop it into a laptop backstage during the rehearsal dinner, probably with a glass of wine in hand. They wouldn't screen it. Not them. They'd trust the packaging, the image, and then it would play. The morning of the wedding, I turned off my phone. Spent the day with Jake hiking up Rattlesnake Ridge. The sky was clear, air sharp. Every step felt lighter. Not because I expected retribution, but because I had spoken. That evening, just after sunset, my inbox began to fill. Unread messages, missed calls, voicemails from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. A message from my cousin Lisa that read simply, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. By the time I turned my phone back on the next morning, the notifications had multiplied. Missed calls from my mother, my father, even Derek. A string of messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. Screenshots, links, comments. Jake was already up, coffee in hand, standing at the kitchen counter with his laptop open. He didn't say anything, just turned the screen toward me. It was Reddit. The post had nearly 1 million views. Title: Groom's estranged brother sends family video to wedding. They played it in front of 200 guests. It wasn't what they expected. The top comment read, "That was some HBO-level karma." I have chills. A friend of mine from college had reshared the clip on Twitter with the caption, "Toxic families think they can rewrite history." Not anymore. In the video, the guests sat watching in confusion as smiling childhood photos faded into cold boardroom audio. The music stayed sweet and calm while my mother's clipped voice whispered about how Derek had always been the one they could count on. My father's laugh dismissive as he called me too reactive for leadership, the part where he said the store was wasted on someone like me. Landed like a slap in the middle of champagne toasts. I hadn't expected the bride to walk out. She did. Midway through the video, she stood from the head table, face pale, dress still pristine, and walked out in silence. Her father followed. Derek didn't. He was frozen, hands clenched around his glass. My mother fainted. My father tried to stop the video, but it kept playing. Someone had looped the ending into a still frame of me at the store's reopening, ribbon cutting, standing just out of frame while Derek cut the ribbon. Whoever recorded the scene had done it discreetly, probably on a phone, but the angle was perfect. You could hear the murmurs, the gasps, the sudden awkward silence when the lights came up. Jake watched me for a long moment. "You knew it would blow up, didn't you?" I shook my head. "I just wanted them to see it." He smirked. "Well, now everyone has." By noon, it had made BuzzFeed. By evening, a local journalist reached out asking for an interview. I ignored the messages, let them pile up. Some people called me brave, others called me vindictive. I didn't care. The truth was finally out there, raw, undeniable. A day later, I got an email from the bride's sister. Just a few lines. "Thank you for showing her what she was marrying into. You did the right thing." That night, I sat alone in my room and watched the video again, not out of pride, not even to relive the fallout, but to remind myself it was real, that I had spoken, that I had taken the pieces they'd tried to bury and laid them bare in front of everyone who mattered to them. They had always been obsessed with appearances. The perfect family, the perfect son, the perfect wedding. Now the world saw what I had lived, and maybe for the first time that was enough. 2 mornings after the wedding video made the rounds, I walked into a coffee shop near our office and saw my own face on the cover of the Seattle Herald. The headline read, "Brothers' Bold Reveal at Wedding Sparks National Conversation on Family Estrangement." I didn't buy the paper, just stood there for a second scanning the words through the plastic stand. A barista noticed and did a double take. She didn't say anything, just handed me my drink a little more carefully than usual. Back at the office, Jake was already waiting with his laptop open. His eyes were wider than normal. "You're on everything," he said, "not just Reddit. BuzzFeed, Daily Mail, even the Washington Post picked it up. They called it one of the most poetic acts of digital rebellion in recent wedding history." I sank into the chair across from him and pulled out my own laptop. He wasn't exaggerating. My inbox had quadrupled in unread emails. Some were angry, others grateful. Dozens of strangers shared their own stories. Brothers, sisters, people in their 60s writing about pain they still carried from being the invisible one in their families. There was a message from a producer at Face the Truth, a syndicated national talk show. She said my story had resonated across demographics and invited me to share it live. Said they'd fly me out, cover the hotel, everything. I deleted it without replying. Jake watched me. "You sure?" I nodded. "This isn't a performance." I said what I needed to say. He nodded but didn't look convinced. That night, Jake posted the story on his blog. He didn't use names. Just a title, "The Son Who Refused to Stay Silent." It wasn't sensational. It was honest. He wrote about what it's like to watch someone constantly bend themselves into shapes just to be accepted, only to be told they were never enough. He wrote about me. But more than that, he wrote about every person who had ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, don't ruin the family photo. The post exploded. Within 3 days, it had been shared over 200,000 times. People wrote in from other countries. Therapists linked to it. Teachers printed it out for class discussions. One nonprofit reached out asking if they could use it in a support group for adults healing from family trauma. Somewhere between the surge of comments and the second interview request from NPR, a publisher sent an email. They said they were interested in a memoir. Something about family identity and the quiet resistance of walking away. I didn't answer. The silence wasn't avoidance, it was peace. Jake handled the press, politely declined interviews, forwarded anything serious to a lawyer friend. I kept working, took meetings, helped a new client in Spokane overhaul their entire brand presence in under a month. Every once in a while, I'd get recognized. On the street, in airports, once at a gas station. People didn't ask for selfies, they just wanted to say thank you. Or sometimes "I'm sorry," like they were apologizing on behalf of every parent who'd ever said, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" One night I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. It said I watched the video at the wedding. I was Derek's college roommate. I never liked the way he spoke about you. I'm sorry I never said anything before. You were right to leave. They never deserved you. I folded the letter and placed it in the same folder where I'd kept all my records. The one marked for Napa. I retitled it Not Revenge, Just Proof. That same week, I got an email from a nonprofit based in Colorado. They were launching a national campaign focused on supporting teens and young adults who had been rejected by their families. Not just LGBTQ youth, though, that was part of it, but anyone who had been emotionally orphaned by the people who were supposed to love them first. They had seen Jake's blog, watched the video, read the coverage, and they wanted me to be the face of the campaign. I didn't say yes immediately. I took a day. Walked along the pier in Seattle, watching the ferries come and go. Thought about the 15-year-old version of me hiding in the garage during family dinners pretending to study. I thought about how different my life might have been if someone had said, "You don't have to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it." I said yes. The photo shoot was simple. Natural light. No suits. No drama. Just honesty. They asked me to write a letter to my younger self for the campaign's main billboard. I kept it short. You are not too much. They are just not enough. The billboard went up in 5 cities: Portland, Chicago, Austin, Boston, Seattle. I didn't see them all. But people sent pictures, teens posing with peace signs, a mom holding her daughter's hand. One message read, "My son showed me this. I apologized to him that night." Meanwhile, the story kept circulating. A law office in Manhattan that had previously promoted Derek on their website as a rising star in family litigation quietly removed his profile. Then a leaked email surfaced showing a partner expressing concern about optics and alignment with firm values. Derek issued a statement claiming the video had been selectively edited and taken out of context. But the context was already clear. People weren't interested in hearing excuses. They had heard the tone. They had seen the patterns. There was no defense for erasure. I didn't reply to Derek, not to his messages, not to the email his assistant sent asking to connect privately. I didn't feel angry, just done. A few days later, I received a letter in handwriting I recognized immediately. It was from my mother. Neat cursive, light blue ink, no stamp. It had been hand-delivered to my building's front desk. She didn't address me as Ryan. Just "Dear son." It was 3 pages long, apologizing for not listening, for always comparing, for choosing silence over support. She said she had written it a dozen times and deleted it every time, that she didn't expect forgiveness, just hoped I would read it. I did. Then I put it back in the envelope and tucked it into the same folder. I didn't reach out. Jake asked me what I'd do with it. Nothing, I said. "You don't want her to know you read it?" I looked at him. If I answer, it makes it a dialogue. I'm not interested in a dialogue. I'm interested in understanding. That night, I wrote a single post on my own account, the first one since everything. It read, "I don't need them to suffer. I just needed them to know how deeply I did." And then I turned off the comments. 6 months passed before I returned to Salem. It wasn't planned as a homecoming. A local commerce association had invited me to speak at their annual summit recognizing entrepreneurs who had made a social impact. The invite came with a polite note from the chairwoman saying my story had inspired dozens of small business owners to rethink how they treat the people behind their success. Jake came with me. He insisted, not because he thought I needed protection, but because he knew this chapter needed to be witnessed. The event was held at the Civic Center downtown, same building where years ago I had watched Derek accept a scholarship award while I stood off to the side clapping with a plastic smile. This time there was a banner with my name on it, a seat at the front, a program that listed me as the closing speaker. I arrived just before the ceremony started. Jake squeezed my hand before I stepped out of the car. "You ready?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure. Inside, the crowd was bigger than expected. Small business owners, high school students, retirees, a few reporters. Camera flashes started as I walked toward the stage. I kept my face neutral, confident, focused. It wasn't until I reached the front row that I saw them, my parents, sitting together stiff and silent. Derek wasn't with them. My mother clutched her purse like it might float away. My father's jaw was set. Their eyes didn't meet mine, but they didn't look away either. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just walked past. The ceremony began with awards, speeches, laughter. A jazz band played softly in the corner. People clapped. The energy was warm, supportive. My name was called last. When I stepped onto the stage, the room went quiet. I looked out over the audience, not for them, for me, to see it, to feel the ground under my feet in a place where I had once been invisible. I spoke briefly, thanked the organizers, talked about second chances and what it meant to be trusted. I didn't mention the store, or the wedding, or the video. I didn't need to. I ended with a quote from a mentor who had helped me through the early days in Seattle. Something simple. You build the life that proves them wrong by living it fully, not by shouting louder. The room stood up when I finished. Applause, cameras, lights. Somewhere near the back, I saw a teenager wiping their eyes. A teacher put a hand on their shoulder. I stepped down from the stage and Jake was there waiting. He didn't say anything, just took my hand and held it like it was the most normal thing in the world. We walked down the aisle together, past tables and clapping hands, past the row where my parents sat frozen in a silence of their own making. My mother blinked rapidly. My father looked straight ahead. I didn't stop. Outside, the air was cooler than expected. Clean, fresh. Jake smiled. "You did it," he said. I looked at him. We did. The ceremony was held in a small glass house nestled in the hills outside Seattle. Surrounded by trees, the late afternoon sun filtering through branches like quiet blessings. Everything was green and gold and simple, just the way Jake and I wanted. We kept the guest list small. Friends, colleagues, people who had stood by us when the noise was loud and the road was unclear. No one from my family was invited. Not out of anger, but clarity. You don't build bridges to places you've already outgrown. 3 days before the wedding, a letter arrived at our apartment, handwritten. No return address, but I knew the writing. My mother. Again. I didn't open it. I placed it in the same drawer where I had kept the first one. Not as a gesture of defiance, just peace. Some stories didn't need sequels. Jake and I got ready together the morning of the wedding. No tradition, no forced separation. Just coffee, shared jokes, and quiet looks that said more than words ever could. When I stood at the altar facing the man who had seen every piece of me, I didn't feel like the broken son or the invisible brother. I felt whole, like every version of me, young, bruised, determined, had finally arrived in one place. The vows were short, honest. I promised laughter, presence, and partnership. He promised home, not a building, not a place, a feeling. After the ceremony, we gathered for the reception under the soft string lights. The air smelled like pine and lavender. Someone played acoustic guitar. Laughter moved through the night like music itself. When it was time for my speech, I stood in front of the people who mattered. Jake squeezed my hand one last time and let me go. I looked at the crowd and smiled. Thank you. Not just for being here today, but for being here all the days before today. For every coffee when I was silent. Every call when I didn't pick up. Every time you reminded me I was more than how I'd been treated. I took a breath and let my eyes rest on the faces that had become my family. I used to think the worst thing in life was losing your place in the family you were born into. But it's not. The worst thing is thinking you never deserved a place at all. Today isn't about revenge. This wedding isn't about proving anything. It's a declaration. That I am not what they said, that I am not the silence they demanded. This I gestured around is what happens when you stop asking for a seat at someone else's table. You build your own. The room applauded not loudly but warmly. A sound that felt like healing. Later that night, Jake and I stood outside on the deck watching our guests dance inside. He leaned his head on my shoulder. "Think your mom opened the letter she never sent?" he asked. "Maybe, maybe not." I looked up at the stars. Doesn't matter. I opened my life instead, and that was the real story. If you've ever been pushed out of the family you were born into, ask yourself this: would you be brave enough to build one better? Because I think you are. And I think you deserve to try. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if you saw even a small part of yourself in it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this need light. Let's make sure they're never hidden again.